Well, that's the extent I will use my Georgian knowledge here. But hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be here, and interesting talk about change. And I was also going to talk about change, but from a different angle. Actually, one thing that maybe is worth mentioning here, amongst other things that I did, I was responsible for public administration reform in Estonia at the end of 90s, beginning of 2000s, sort of from the coalition politicians' side. And so I know very well this kind of debates that you are having with this civil service reform. But next to the civil service reform, actually, there are four other components usually in the public administration reform. I mean, the overall organization, the public finance, local government reforms, and then finally the question of e-governance. Now, what I want to talk today to you about is actually something more global. On the first part, I want to talk about the change itself. Because, well, it is certainly a good idea to look forward to create a better civil service, but will there be a civil service at all in the same format, or will there be a government in such a way? And if yes, how the changes or what will happen, how can they be made more efficient? So I will try to first paint a picture a little bit of the change and to show it, just to kind of tickle a little bit of vision. You know, you have a very good, you had a very good reform here in Georgia with this public service hall thing, and that's great, but I mean, is that the end of the change, or is it just the intermediary step? So that would be what I would like to talk about, and now let me try if I can advance. Oops, no? No? Okay. Yes, so recipe of successful change. Democracy instead of bureaucracy. It doesn't mean that we are going to put out bureaucrats. And bureaucrat, in my terminology, is actually a good person, not a bad one. But, whoops. Okay, I found it. So, what is government? The first, oops, now it is jumping up and down. What is government? First of all, anyway, this is a picture of it from ages back, and the previous speaker also mentioned what happened before. Anyway, Harold Innis, Canadian philosopher, back in 1940s, wrote a book, or rather made some presentations with, which became a book, on the influence of communications in the government. And he stipulated, it's by the way a very interesting book and very good summary in Wikipedia if somebody wants to read it. But he starts to explain that, well, the government as such, or the states, occurred when we started to write, really. When we could put down some things that we agreed upon commonly. And that this was done in the clay tablets, and that's why basically these ancient states were along the rivers, because it was very difficult to carry the tablets around. But when the papyrus was introduced, then the word of the emperor or god could travel much longer, and then the empires were born. He also explains why in ancient Greece, for example, actually there were, it wasn't one Greece, but there were many city-states, because they didn't have really literacy to write things down initially. They had oral culture. So again, the state in such a way was as far as the voice traveled, so to speak, in the limits of the town. Anyway, he goes on to discuss the introduction of paper, printing, and so on. I don't want to stop on this too long. What I want to say is that he stopped short because it was 1950. The first computers actually were created, but not really influencing anything. He stopped there, and for a long time nobody thought what could happen or will happen afterwards. But we had a big this kind of ICT revolution, so to speak, which is exemplified by, well, one of the steps, what I would want to show, I mean, the personal computer. Actually, yes, there were mainframe computers before, and they were used by the government. But these mainframe computers didn't have, I would say, that much influence on the essence of how the management would look like, or how the country or the would look like. So, but these first personal computers that became of mass use back in 1987, when IBM started to produce them, it was the first year over 1 million of computers were sold, and this started to define really the way how we looked at the management itself. And it occurred more or less with by the end of 80s, beginning of 90s actually, there was another revolution going on. There had been an ARPANET, the predecessor of internet, really from 1967, but the communication on it was very arcane and very difficult. And in the beginning of 90s, this communication between the computers, between the servers, became democratic with this www, what we all know now, World Wide Web, where we could really put the information on. And these two things, I think, revolutionized quite a bit the way of all our human activities in terms of how we organize this, how we manage this. Initially, the first steps came from the private sector, of course, and many of the private sector changes have been later incorporated into the public sector. And I mean, when we think of back of a previous speaker talking about this civil service reform, I mean, in the public sector there were all these things move along the fashion quite often. So there were public management ideas at the end of 90s and then return to the good government, etc. But I think there has been something more fundamental. And this technology development really has been very recent, but has been very profound. And we are still trying to adjust our organizations to this reality. And so what has changed really? The distance. We had a previous speaker from Strasbourg giving us a talk, so as if he is with us. I'm traveling the world most of the last 20 years, and I'm still participating in Estonian public life as well. The ownership of things has changed with the new technologies. I mean, it used to be in traditional worlds that either, I mean, I had this, whatever it is called, remote. If I give it to you, then you have it, but then I don't have it. But with ideas, it's different, right? So if I share an idea with you, then we both have this idea. So the ownership ideas will change and have changed. Excuse me. And all this takes us to really a new way of organizing our common life, organizing the government. Of course, the businesses as well, etc., as organizations, but we can learn it. As I said, initially the changes took place in private sector, so we can learn from these management theories quite a lot. And one of the basic ideas that they are talking about is flattening out of the pyramidal structures. Second is that the change has become kind of a new permanency, that it isn't that we do one day a change or 1 month a change or 1 year a change and then we can live ever happily afterwards. So we have to change our mentality and our understanding of what is changing. So the changes in information management, for example, which is part of the regular job for the public servants, are quite profound, even if they are not really maybe talked that much about. One is that the regular activity was to think out of something which everybody agreed more or less, and then we sent out, or this place which formalized it sent out circulars. I mean, they sent out, let's say, a Ministry of Education thought of how the school renovations should take place, or the change of school roofs, let's say. So they sent it out to everybody, and maybe 2 or 3 schools needed at that time. The rest, well, the clerks filed this information away, and then when it became necessary, then they withdrew it from their own places. Nowadays, this type of bureaucratic activity practically does not exist anymore. Well, somewhere and a little bit, but basically the information is saved kind of where it is created, and then it is withdrawn when it is needed by those who need it. So big change. The second thing I already said, I mean, the hierarchical organizations, there is less need, or the communication itself has become more efficient, so there is less need for the hierarchy for this just organizational sake. Yes, the hierarchy is still there, but it works a little bit differently. I'll show you in the slides what I think is going to happen with the state. But one of the issues that you are talking about also about cyber threats, and one of the big changes, for example, what happens with information management now is that, and it is really ongoing, it was short sort of problems with the previous system were exemplified by the WikiLeaks, by the Snowden and all this. I mean, you defend it's a perimeter. So if somebody breached the perimeter, if somebody was insider, then the system's information was very easily available. So now it is what we talk about really is protection of the integrity of data instead of just some information system as such. What we also see, and this is a 21st century developments, we see that there is a totally different way how this visual information is changed. I mean, there is no control over it. You had just recently a scandal pertaining that there is instantaneity. I mean, there is this immediacy of information. There are these kind of really easy ways to create new communities via social applications like Facebook, let's say. Actually, I've been thinking that if people now don't, in the government, think very hard of how the government or how the state should look like, then a lot of people will migrate to the sort of Facebook of whatever, when there is also the, if you have the financial organization part in the same place. And Facebook has actually added some kind of new features that you can already collect some money and so on. But it's kind of like a this kind of environment where you can organize some common interests, some common action, and support this action with finances. So why do we need the state if we have the Facebook? Well, I mean, just a hyperbole, but that is something about the change that we need to think about. So the traditional bureaucracy is centered around places. Your public service house is a very nice example of that. It is still in one place. I mean, everybody goes there. Yes, it gave Georgian government kind of a new image, very good as such, but it's still a place. It's not a web. For example, when we talk about the Estonian experience, we skipped pretty much this one-stop shop movement. Yes, we have it for those people who cannot use or don't want to use the new technologies, but the vision that we had was that people would communicate with the state immediately without the help or the need of civil servants. And so that has happened pretty much in our country, and I see the difficulty because of the success of the public service halls in your case to move beyond that and start using mygov.g, which is you do have the platform, but you do have the means in Georgia to actually move beyond this traditional bureaucracy, but it is not really yet taking place that much. So the traditional bureaucracy, also the procedures which are embedded in people in these defined spaces. The same when I went to the public service hall to get my residency permit, then I had to go to the different people. And then on the professional level, I started to ask, look, but why do I need to go to the different ladies? Why can't I just do everything with one person? And they said to me, well, there are specific procedures which are managed by specific people. And I said, why this knowledge of, or the wisdom of this, what is enshrined in laws and so on, why isn't it embedded into the information system itself? It can be done, it is done, we have done it pretty much in Estonia, and I'm sure sooner or later you will be doing it as well. But I mean, that is ideas. In the webocracy, you have the information systems and you create things around the users. And the users don't really need to know the procedures exactly. They need to log in and then they will be guided through. So that is kind of where I believe any government is going to move very soon. So no mammoth standalone systems like in 20th century with local workstation and data exchange through the email, etc. What is going to happen is that there is going to be a totally different way of how the back office is going to work. And there is a need for the civil servants, no doubt on it. But these kind of menial jobs which were reduced by the advancement of technology. I mean, there still are people who are using shovels, but when we had excavators, then the need for them became much reduced. The same processes are going to take place in the civil service of the 21st century as well. So if I'm coming from the perspective actually of political science, so many people think that I'm IT guy. I'm not. When we studied at the universities how the state looks like, it was described in the traditional sort of political science world as a black box initially. There was something called input, it is politics, and then something called output, which was policy. What happened inside in much of the 20th century was not really people's business. So it was only in 1966 really that Americans came out with something called well, they called it nicely a sunshine law, but it was the right to know the data, to know the documents, which has spread, and practically now all OECD countries have, at all EU countries have the regulation of how people can retrieve the data. But I don't think that, and much of it with this open government initiative that Georgia is participating quite a bit also, is taking this kind of understanding that this information has to be open to a new level, that people can themselves take this information. They don't have to ask necessarily about this information. So there is this kind of active information offering from the government side. But actually, we could see much more. We could see that, or we can see through this, because all this information is flowing already in information systems, we could see where it is stopping, where some procedure that needs approval is halted, etc. So if and when people will get access to this kind of knowledge, then I think there is going to be something that is hierarchical nature of the state organization will be much reduced. And when we see, when we look sort of the global picture of the developments of the 21st century, then you know the terminology participatory democracy. I mean that it is a century of participation, participatory rights, etc. So pretty much is this what is happening. I mean the state in the traditional way of hierarchical black boxes fading away, and fading away more or less everywhere. Some places faster, some places slower, but that is where we are heading. So that was kind of yes, I call it transparency of procedures as opposed to just transparency of information. But in all this, I mean, the computers and the technology really is a very small part of it. The computers, maybe it's 20%. The 80%, it is something else. It's a leadership, organization, re-engineering of business processes, all that. So the change of the public administration reform really shouldn't hang on these kind of hopes that technology itself is changing things. No, technology, it's kind of the change is like an iceberg. There is some parts that are visible, but there are lots of it which is non-visible, but nevertheless has to be addressed because it is where the major effort should be done. And as I said, we are doing it, or I'm looking at it usually, changes through the view of IT and how this e-governance works. And we've come up with a sort of the e-government infrastructure picture, which is that you need to have access, but you do in Ukraine, in Georgia. Yes, access could be higher or faster, but still there is enough access already for the change. The digitalized information, one of the good things that Georgia did early in the changes in the 2000s was to create these digitalized databases of population registry, business registry, land cadastre, that really helps to change the procedures behind them also. There is a question of formalized exchange. Again, in Georgia, you do have it. You have created data exchange agency in the Ministry of Justice, and at least in potential, it can exchange or facilitate the exchange of data government-wide. And you do have in Georgia, but not in Ukraine, as far as I know now, the digital identity, meaning that you have the ID cards. Well, you haven't been using that much to log into some, banking or government services, but I'm sure that this change is about to occur very quickly. And anyway, what happens after that, is that if all these things are in place, then you can put the E or M or X, whatever, in front of all the current institutions of the state. And what it really means is that all these institutions will be connected to each other over the communication networks. And that is a very big thing, because then you can start to offer e-services. But before that, and now getting into the concrete things, let me stop with the last vision thing. This, these pictures, first the left side picture is from Estonian cabinet meeting back in 2000. Second is same thing in 2010. So you see it's a little bit more modern, but it was very modern in 2000 also. But it's not really about getting the ministers to sit behind the computers. Everybody does it today, and much of them did it already back in 2000. But what is important is kind of the vision that we had, that we said, well, look, this is the change that we want to get throughout our government, that something is going to change, and it wasn't just that you had the computers, it was to rework all the procedures, how information was given for the decision makers, how they could retrieve this information, how they could react to this information. And I was with the government at the time. I was in the governing coalition. I remember there were some people who were rather unhappy, the ministers, who said, well, look, now you do this, but when the government changes, well, this goes back to the sort of normal governing procedure. Well, it never went back. It remained the same way or improved. But it really started from a very little thing. We didn't have, I mean, if you look at the Western countries, and their consultants, they come in and say, well, look, we have to create a big strategy. We did this thing without a strategy, really. We just wanted to have a place to put the data projector so that we could look at the financial data and the charts that were provided to the cabinet without shuffling through this big brick of papers that was usually given. But when we did that, when we identified the need for this and the solution, then we started to expand and created already hands-on the new rules of how the cabinet started to function. Now, I would like to address a little bit beyond this kind of visionary thing, the way how this change actually can take place, and to highlight a couple of components. What we are using in eGovernance Academy when we are trying to explain these things, I'll call it a CHAR, a simplified change management framework. And it is somewhat different than some of the other stuff you have probably heard, but I mean the main ingredients for change are always the same. I mean it is, yes, you have the problems with culture, yes, you need the political support, etc. But the stress, I think, is on vision, what I would say. The vision, because the technical change cannot be really too well communicated to the neither to the leaders nor to the public at large, nor to different levels of administration, the same good bureaucrats, because they all look it from their point of view, exactly what the previous speaker was telling, and then thinking, okay, am I going to be harmed by this change? So it is better to be careful than to embrace the change. This is a very natural human reaction. So in order to overcome that, first you need a very good communication strategy, but it is not the strategy, but it is a vision that is carrying the new messages. That is important. And so in many cases, let's say when we have the EU assistance projects or World Bank projects or USAID projects, we say, okay, we do this or that. And we take it kind of into the technical level. And then we forget that actually behind it, there has to be the vision. It has to come through this or be embedded into this project. Because when you think of this change, and I'm talking mostly through this IT change or how IT is influencing how the organizations function, how the e-services are provided, then what happens very often is that it is delegated to the IT people. And IT people, well, quite naturally, of course, because it is IT, communications, internet, whatever. But IT people are not lawyers, or they don't really drive the legal departments. So they can't really go to the other department and say, okay, we need the legal change also. Quite often, they don't even know that the legal change is necessary. Then there is a big part, as I said, in this communication. All this communication strategy has to be sort of also done, but this is another department in the government, in the ministry, in the organization. And the IT people don't really talk to these communication people either. So there are lots of these silos, how the traditional organization has been built upon. And the traditional way of looking into the change of and introduction of e-government is to give this piece to one silo, the IT guys. And it is really, from one hand, like a caricature that the IT department is somewhere sort of in the basement behind the elevator, you know, where nobody needs to see them. And I've been in one of the countries not that long ago that really wanted to have the good e-government, very good project, and they even had a big component in their project which was called change management. And the IT company who got this service, they didn't know really what this change management is. And they invited me to advise them, and one of the first things that I did was, after being 2 weeks in the basement with the IT guys, I said, look, when we had the project sort of progress meeting, I said, look, it doesn't work that way. You want to change the policy, you want to change how your businesses are working, but I mean, these are the business processes. The IT guys don't know anything about this. So you have to integrate this project into the policy level, not in the IT department level. and which was done, and it actually started to work. But I feel it here also a lot, that in many different ways, that the ministers think that, okay, we have shown our political commitment by passing some kind of decision to do things. So now things don't bother with us, with these things. But actually, and this one or another certain department should do the job. But these departments, if you are talking about change, have to interact with each other. And that is not always happening in a too good manner. So you need always a facilitator. And this kind of political support to change is not just by a decision. It is by a kind of being involved in management and being actually always able to push for the changes. Because the big thing that is happening really is, which side did I have to, oops. Okay, let me just go quickly show you a couple of things. The government, the best way how I would describe the government is that it is a spider web of dependencies. You can't take very much portion of it out and create a new environment in this portion. Because whenever you try to, for example, eliminate paperwork, then it turns out that there are public administration procedures that need to be changed, and they can be changed not just for one organization, but have to be changed for all. And then it is not anymore the purview of, let's say, the Ministry of Environment, who wanted to create a paperless let's say, licensing system, because the legislation requires papers, so you have to change these things. And it is not the job of the IT person. So you have to go above. You have to always be able for a change to elevate things to the higher level. It is because of this spider web of dependency question. Well, I mean, the basic truth of governance, just to repeat a couple of things, only change coming from below is revolution, and nobody in the right mindset really wants that. But the change from above, as I said, means active involvement of the decision makers interested in change, not in words. I was in politics. I know how politicians use words, and they always find the right words and say, oh, I'm interested in this, I'm interested in that. You know how to check it, whether they are interested, whether they allocate first the financial means to this, the resources to this, what they want to achieve, and second, whether they allocate their own time to this. If they do this, then they are interested, then actually things are happening. And then, the question to a large degree, again, going back to the spider web question, is that you can't decide the things on your own in public administration, not only because of the procedures, but because the input comes from other organizations. So how you can change the procedures in your organization, maybe to a large degree, but how can you convince the others to actually participate in this change? How would the other organization bring you the data that you want to use, for example, for electronic processing of licenses? There you can't order usually, because there are the hierarchies, I mean, don't extend beyond. Well, you can order through the cabinet of ministers, maybe, but by itself, the silos still exist. So what you do is you have to lead by example, make the other thing, use the human emotions like envy, or then go above higher level, or create self-interest in other organization to do something. So these are, there is no one recipe, except to say that, well, there has to be a vision, there has to be this kind of direct involvement from top, and there has to be a lot of communication. Because this uncertainty that any change brings is kind of killing the reason why every sane middle-level manager actually works against the change. And big reforms usually die in this kind of middle-level management because they haven't heard what the real reason is. They can't position themselves in the new game, and therefore it is better to find very good reasons why things cannot be done instead of trying to find ways how things can be done. So the change management in that sense is inside the organization with the partnering organizations. And I mean, I'm not, I think I should kind of stop soon. My time is going over time. I leave the slides so you can look at them. I mean, I have been speaking about the change management in many cases, in many places. But yes, if we go into the very practical details, I mean, mapping the difficulties, what the organization has, creating the vision, consulting, informing employees, and creating a success story. That is also a very interesting thing. I mean, creation of or showing because that successful change is possible. Because what I both in Ukraine and even more in Georgia, what I hear is the story that no, it's not possible to change really. I mean, when I came right after the Rose Revolution, I remember I had a task for the UNDP and for the Soros Foundation to kind of find a way how to assist Georgia. And what I heard was, oh, we know everything. We know how it is, and nothing can be changed. And out of this came the idea, where we started our change in Estonia, was with something we call the Tiger Leap. And it was also addressing the change in the cultural level of the people. People are kind of skeptical towards the mass media everywhere. So you need to have the message of change given through the people themselves. So we did it through the schools. And actually, we helped you to do the same with Irmis Naktomis, if you remember the Deer Leap project. And it was exactly because there was so much resistance or skepticism towards the change. And this overall buy-in is necessary. And if you can create your change story into the larger change story, especially with Georgia, it is possible, and I think it is even plausible that your change story is going to be very attractive very soon. Because when we look at the big data, we see the change happening. I mean, that is why other countries are coming now to Georgia already the same way as they used to come to Estonia and think, how did you do that? It is just a little bit of stress on different things. I think one of the things where it has to be in Georgia is, by the way, anti-corruption efforts. I mean, you can see anti-technology, technological change that has helped that. So these are these kind of ways to address the change management. Let me try to see if there is one. I will just want to show you. We have this slide. You know Salvador Dali. It was my favorite poster, actually, when I was a student. I had it on my wall. When I saw the original, it was kind of disappointing. It's so small, but never mind. The point being, it's a farewell to memories, but it shows somehow the fluidity of time. And when you are inside the change, you don't notice it that much. At the same time, the political life requires you to perform immediately. Especially not the civil servants, but the leaders are under pressure to show the results immediately, at least every 4 years. But if you have this kind of change of leadership, well, first year just to find out where you are and what you are doing, and then you have the procurement rules, and then you have other changes that are also necessary. You can't do much in 4 years, I'm sorry to say. So if you look at the change, a successful kind of, let's say, introduction of e-services, I mean, in IT world, people talk about killer applications, that there are such things. Actually, there aren't. In public administration, at least, when we, in Estonia, you can pay all your taxes online, but it took us 10 years to get there. The same way now, over half of the population is using ID cards to digitally sign documents and so on, which we consider a very good thing, and it is helping our economy even. That's fine. But it took us quite a number of years. I have actually in some other presentations shown that it takes for this type of changes really to be there. It takes way more than one election cycle. It usually takes about 10 years to see this change, and then you can say it's a success. So in the meantime, you have to be working based on faith, and for that I wish you all good luck.
Thank you very much.